Every living president except one had ancestors who owned slaves. And you'll never believe which one it is.
Mr. Reagan.
All right, before we start, I've got a great new sponsor for the show, Gold Co. If you want to diversify your portfolio, protect your savings, safeguard your retirement, try investing in gold with Gold Co. Go to MrReaganLikesGold.com or call 844-696-GOLD or click on the link in the description below.
My family, as far back as history records, never owned slaves. I actually have written proof of this. I found an old German census document from my family's farm, and right there, next to the two servants we employed, it says explicitly, not a slave. My ancestors came to America after slavery ended here, and we came from Germany between the Civil War and World War II. We were always on the right side of history. And yet I'm told that I owe reparations simply because I'm white. I'm told that my time is up. I'm told that it's time for women and blacks and gays to take over because white men like me benefited from slavery. But here's the thing. Only about 5% of white Americans are actually descended from slave owners. 5%. Meanwhile, almost all black Americans are descended from slave owners because the physical intermingling between plantation owners and slaves was more common than you might think. And now Reuters has uncovered something that should make every leftist's head explode. Donald Trump, the man they call the Führer, the man they say is the most racist president in history, is the only living US president whose ancestors never owned slaves. Barack Obama, the left's all-time favorite, his ancestors owned slaves. Think about that for a moment. Reuters did this massive investigation into every living president and also every major political figure in DC. They used census data, family documents, the works, and what they found completely destroys the left's narrative about race in America. Trump's paternal grandparents came from Karlstad, Germany. His mother, Mary McLeod, came from Scotland in the early 1900s. They all immigrated after 1865, after slavery was abolished, just like my family. They never owned slaves. But Obama, one of his ancestors, 6 generations back, owned 2 slaves. Joe Biden, his ancestor, owned 1 slave. Jimmy Carter, his ancestors, owned 54 slaves. George W. Bush, 25 slaves. Bill Clinton, 1 slave. Every single living president, except Donald Trump, descends from slave owners. Jack Posobiec tweeted, Reuters seriously did an entire deep investigation into the history of every living president and elected official in the United States government and proved that the only recent president who was not descended from slave owners was Donald J. Trump. And it gets worse for the left. Amy Coney Barrett and Neil Gorsuch descended from slave owners. Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, and also Elizabeth Warren and Tammy Duckworth. 100 members of the 117th Congress are direct descendants of slaveholders. When Donald Trump found out about this, he posted on Truth Social, he wrote, I hope that every African American in our country is reading this right now. Remember. Of course, MSNBC immediately attacked him for it. They said he was oversimplifying slavery's legacy. They brought up housing discrimination allegations from the 1970s, anything to distract from this devastating fact. Because this completely obliterates their entire worldview. The man they've spent years calling a white supremacist is the only president without slavery in his family tree. Meanwhile, their heroes, Obama, Biden, they're all descended from the very slave owners they claim to despise. The ex-user Baklava USA posted, Donald Trump is the first president who is not a descendant of slave owners. Kamala and Obama are descendants of slave owners. This man provides the hard truths. And speaking of Kamala, we already knew about her Jamaican plantation owner ancestor, but this research reveals that it's not just her, it's almost every major Democrat politician. Senator Tammy Duckworth called learning about her slave-owning ancestors gut-wrenching. Well, Tammy, imagine how gut-wrenching it is for me and the 95% of white Americans who never had slave-owning ancestors to be constantly blamed for slavery, to be told that we have white privilege because of something our ancestors never did. This is what drives me insane about the reparations debate. California Reparations Task Force recommended paying up to $1.2 million to black residents. But who's going to pay for that? Me, my family who came here as poor German immigrants after slavery? While the descendants of actual slave owners like Obama and Biden lecture us about our privilege? And you know what's really revealing? When PBS's Finding Your Roots exposed Ben Affleck's slave-owning uncle, he was so embarrassed he posted a groveling apology on Facebook. But has Obama apologized for his slave-owning ancestors? Has Biden? Of course not, because the rules don't apply to these hypocritical leading figures of the Democrat Party. And let's not forget, the Democrat Party was the party of slavery, the party of the KKK, the party of Jim Crow. Republicans freed the slaves. Hundreds of thousands of white Republicans died to free the slaves, and now their descendants are being told, we owe reparations. Now, I'm going to explain how this completely changes everything we've been told about race in America in one moment, but first I have to talk about my amazing sponsor.
The news does not stop, does it? We have got a credit downgrade for the good old US of A nationwide debt problem that's spiraling out of control. And we're watching billionaires and central banks stockpile gold. In fact, billionaire investor Ray Dalio just made a $319 million bet on gold. And did I mention that gold has broken another record, climbing past $3,500 an ounce? I still remember when it was under $2,000. It wasn't that long ago. Look, it seems clear to me that now is the time to learn more about how gold and silver can help you. So reach out to my partners over at Gold Co. They're a great company that I trust, an award-winning organization. They've got over 7,000 5-star ratings, and they've helped me out tremendously. Visit MrReaganLikesGold.com to get their free 2025 gold and silver kit, and you'll also learn about their unlimited bonus silver offer. It's a great way to get started. Go to MrReaganLikesGold.com or call 844-696-GOLD.
Here's what's really fascinating about the Reuters investigation. They did not set out to vindicate Trump. Reuters is not a right-wing outlet. They're leftists. They were trying to expose how many politicians had ties to slavery. But what they accidentally proved was that the entire leftist narrative about white guilt is bullcrap. And here's where things get really interesting. Reuters found that 23% of voters are less likely to support a candidate with slaveholding ancestors. But among Democrats, it's 31%. Among black voters, 35%. So by their own standards, they should be abandoning Obama and Biden and supporting Trump. But of course, they won't, because voting Democrat is never about principles. It's always just about power. Look at South Carolina. All 9 congressional delegates have ancestral links to slavery. That includes black lawmakers like Tim Scott and James Clyburn, whose ancestors were enslaved, but also includes white lawmakers with slaveholding ancestors. What I'm saying here is that the complexity of the history completely destroys the simple white people bad, black people good narrative that the left has been pushing for decades. Now, critics will point out that Trump has defended Confederate statues and resisted renaming military bases. But think about this. Trump has zero ancestral connection to the Confederacy. His defense of those statues is not personal. It's about protecting history. Meanwhile, Democrats with actual slave-owning ancestors, they want to tear down these monuments. Why? Well, maybe it's to hide their own shameful past. Harvard professor Henry Louis Gates Jr. said that these findings should be a learning opportunity to understand historical ties. But we already understand the historical ties, Professor Gates. The ties are that Democrat politicians are descended from slave owners while trying to blame Republicans, in spite of the fact that it's Republicans who fought to free the slaves. And this is, of course, why Trump has criticized propaganda like the 1619 Project. Because the 1619 Project tries to paint all of America as fundamentally racist and built on slavery. But Trump's own family history proves that this is not true. Millions of Americans came here with nothing, worked hard, and built their success without exploiting anyone. My family is the same. We came from Germany. We worked hard. We never owned slaves. We never exploited anyone. And yet we're told that we're the problem. We have to pay reparations. We have to step aside because our time is up. Well, you know what? No, our time is not up. It never even started. We weren't the ones in power. We weren't the ones owning plantations. That was the Democrats. That was the ancestors of Obama and Biden and the very people lecturing us about our privilege. But this isn't just about genealogy. This is about the fundamental lie at the heart of leftist ideology. They built an entire political movement on the idea that white people are collectively guilty for slavery and must pay for the sins of their ancestors. But what happens when we find out that their ancestors are the ones who own slaves? What happens when we find out that the vast majority of white Americans have no connection to slavery whatsoever? The whole house of cards collapses, and that's why they are so desperate to discredit these findings. That's why MSNBC immediately pivoted to housing discrimination allegations from 50 years ago. That's why they'll do anything to change the subject, because they know that if Americans really understood that only 5% of white Americans descend from slave owners, that Trump's family never owned slaves while Obama did, that the Democrat Party was the party of slavery while Republicans died to end it, the entire leftist coalition would fall apart. Black Americans would realize that they have been voting for the descendant of their oppressors. White Americans would realize that we have been accepting guilt for something that our ancestors never did. And everyone would realize that the Democrats have been playing us against each other for decades based on lies. This Reuters investigation was never meant to vindicate Trump. It was never supposed to destroy the left's narrative on race, but that's exactly what it did. And that's why every American needs to know about it. Share this video, tell your friends, because the truth about slavery in America is not what they have been teaching us. The man they call racist is the only president without slave-owning ancestors. The party they call racist is the party that freed the slaves, and the people demanding reparations are the descendants of those slave owners demanding money from the descendants of people who never owned slaves. Sometimes truth really is stranger than fiction. Well, that's it for me. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. And remember, it's not that our liberal friends are ignorant. It's just that they know so much that is not so. Good night.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars. And it's been said if we lose that war, and in so doing lose this way of freedom of ours, history will record with the greatest astonishment that those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.